Okay, we're back, and it's COMP123, lesson 9, week 9, part 2. And we still haven't found the solution for our path problem. But we do know, over the break, we learned that our directory, get current directory method, what it does, as long as we open up our system.io, it tells us the current directory of our bin debug folder, which is where we store all of our files. An example of this would be testfile.txt is in a hidden folder inside of our project files. And if I kind of hide it again, if you notice, I'm just going to hide it. You notice that it goes away, but you can just show all files. And when you do that, you have to go into the bin debug directory, and there it is. Right? Under the release directory, you don't have that. You don't have anything in here right now. All you have is in the debug directory. And this is where you have your executable, right, for COMP123 lesson 9 part 1. If you're going to take this executable piece right here, you can actually run this in anybody else's program, anybody else's code. I can take this executable and I can take it into my Windows machine and double click on it and it'll run because it's a built executable, right? Think about a package. If I give your friend this executable, by the way, you can't email it because it'll error out. It'll say, man, virus, right? Because they think executables are viruses if you email them, right? But if you run this thing, if I take it on a USB stick and put it in a zipped format inside a person's machine and try and run it, it will run as its own little program, right? So in the same place they have this, they also have this where we write our files. But we want to write it in a specific folder inside of our directory structure. How do we do that? That's the question. Let's continue. We're almost done. Okay, so we have this delimiter, and the delimiter allows us to write structured files, right? That's what we're doing here. This is the whole idea behind this thing. And if you notice, this is just a menu that we're using here to ring through the files. And here's an example of what the employee data looks like when we write one file after the other. We can do this manually. We can also do this, and we're writing this thing sequentially, right? But we're just doing it with writes instead of write lines. Okay, so we're writing to a file. Now we need to learn how to read from a file. We know where the file is. Right now it's on the desktop, right? And we also have another file in the debug folder, right? So let's take a look at this code. Same idea, right? File stream in file instead of out file. New file stream. We're gonna take the file name, right? We're gonna do the open method, and we're gonna do a read access. That's what we're doing here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the stream reader instead of a writer. We're going to read from the file, and we're going to use, guess what? A console or a reader method. We're going to go in here, and it's going to read, right? We're going to read every line. Here's our record in, right? And each of these lines that we read, we're going to parse. Okay? Because if you notice how it does it, we're going to look at record in, right? Here's our record in, and we're going to start splitting these things based on our delimiter. So we're going to look at the delimiter, and we're going to use the split method, right, of the string, and we're going to split the file into a field. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to take these fields, and we're going to put them into an array. That's this is what's happening, because here's our field array, our string array right here, and we're going to have each field in its own little spot. Yes, we could certainly do that, but me, I will not. I do not like this, Sam I am. It's not cool. All right? We're going to do something totally different. Why? Because I like this stream writer, but let us do this. When we say read file, this is our write file operation. We're going to take all this, including the try catch. We're going to take it, refactor it. Let's do this together, please. And we're going to extract a method, and we're going to put this into write file. We're going to call this my write method. Maybe we'll call it write file method. How about this? Write file method. There we go. And our write file method is going to be in its own little method. I just extracted it here. And now, you know what? I want this same exact thing, but I want it to be called a read file method. So I want to take this whole thing here because I'm lazy, right? Copy it and put it underneath. Call it the same thing for a second. Here's our, instead of write file method, we're just going to rename this thing to read file method, right? And we got path name and string file name, all that stuff, delimiter, blah, blah, blah. And instead of our file stream out file, we're going to call this in file. We're going to actually rename this. We'll do it manually. Hold on a second, lost. Don't give up. So here's our in file, right? File stream is an in file instead of an out file. And then instead of a stream writer, we're going to use a stream reader, right? And instead of a writer, we're going to make it a reader. We're just renaming stuff. Okay, but otherwise, the operations are exactly the same, right? Here's our, instead of a writer, where we're going to hello world, we're going to loop through and check to see if we're going to write the whole thing. We're going to read the whole thing in, my whole read line. We're going to take the whole read line in and spit it out, right? And we're going to keep doing that, right? Because we only have one line really, so we'll read one line of text from our file for now. So I'll get rid of this, and we'll do a, just to make it simple, we'll make it a reader. I'll show you the final code in a second. Reader.readline, and we're going to put that into our file, right? We'll make it something called file data up top here, right? Don't worry about this for a second. Var, so var is a string of file data, right? We'll initialize it to nothing, and our file data here is going to be read in by the file reader. So file data is equal to reader readline, and we need to do a writer, right? A reader close instead of a writer close. We don't do this. Okay, let me just take away some white space, and then you should be able to see the final code. All right, so we have two methods now. We have the previous write file method, and now we have a new read file method that I just created based on the file write method. Instead of the read or the write, we have a read file method now. It still takes path name and file name and all that stuff, and we're going to use the same file name and path name. And instead of can't do this create. We have to use a instead of a create, we have to do an open. That's the file mode, right? Because file mode has to open now. We have to open an already created file, and then our file access, as an example, is read, because we don't want to write back to the file. We just want to read to it. That's all we're doing. So we're just changing where it says stream writer, we're changing it to stream reader. Wherever it says the file, wherever it says writer like this, we're changing it to reader. I'm going to update this to GitHub so you can see what I'm talking about for those people who are concerned. And we'll say added read file method and write file method. Okay, and commit and home, and I'm going to go unsync commits and sync it up. The one last thing you need to do is, of course, call it. So we've got the write file method, and I'm going to just call my read file method in a second. I don't need a delimiter, but we're just going to call it our read file method with the same stuff. And this time, one thing I'm missing in my read file method is actually it'll read it in, but it won't do anything with the data. We have to print it out. So here's I read it in file data, and then I want to show it on the screen. So I'm going to go console.writeLine, and I'm going to say your data, and then we'll kind of do one of these. Sorry, it's one piece I missed. And file data. Okay, so what this does is it takes the file data that I read from the reader object, and the reader object actually reads the file, this file called inFile, and then it takes the same read line idea that we use from our console, we're going to take from the file. We're going to read the whole line and dump it into this console.writeLine. That's what it's doing. Let me just update this on the solution. So I'm going to go home, I'm going to go changes, I'm going to say updated read file method, commit, home, unsync commits, sync. Okay, cool. Let's us run this thing. Let's see what happens. See if it doesn't crash. Hey, here's my path. I can get rid of that. Your data is hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world. This is good. So I actually read the data from the file, and I don't need this silly console.write, which is this right now. That's part of my main. I'll just comment this out right now because this isn't the answer, right? And I'll try it again. And this is my data. So I'm actually writing to the file, and I'm reaching in and reading the file. That's what I'm doing. So both operations in one document. So, right? I've read it one time, but what if, here's my text file, right? And it's got one line of text. I want to do multiple lines. I want to write and read multiple lines. Well, writing is no problem, because in my writer, here I'm writing, one record. So this is kind of writes one record, because it's just one line, one record, right? And this whole block here actually does that. This whole thing does one record, right? Well, if I want to write 10 records, so 10 lines, right? Obviously, I'm going to do another for loop out here, right? So I'm going to do another for loop. And instead of I'm going to do 10 records, right? And instead of I, that's silly. I'll make it like something else, like J. So it's a different character for now. This is just a very simple example. And I want to take all of this, including the for loop and the write line, right? So I'm going to write a new line to my file every time. I'm going to cut it out, and I'm going to put it in here. So now I'm going to write a bunch of times, right? Okay, cool. I'm writing a bunch of times. Let's check this piece out. And it's only going to read once, one line. Okay, so write it out. I only read one line, but let's take a look at my actual file now. Right? I got a bunch of lines. These are all the lines I wrote, so each of these are a record. And I want to read all these lines in at the same time into one string. One string. Now I need an array. Right? So at the top of my file, then, actually I just do it within a local array here in read file. Instead of here's my file data. Right? My file data is one line of data. Right? So here's my file data. Right? And I want to take this file data and I want to put it into an array. So I'll make an array. Right? I'll make it string array. And I'll call this my file array, so we know what it is, right? And it's an array of string, right? So how would I do that? Do I do this, right? Okay, is it initialized right now? Is there anything in the array? Do I have to do this new string array? Do I have to do this? No. How do I declare how big it is, right? Do I do it when I declare it here? So I want to make this a certain length, like for example, 50. Do I do it there? Or do I do it? Come on, array 101. Correct. So let's say we make it so we know there's like 10 lines. For now, we'll make it a fixed array. But what if you wanted to read as many as possible? Could we do it like an empty array like this? No, we can't do that with arrays, can we? Like one of these? Because we need to know the length, right? So let's make it 10 for now. So 10 lines, 10 strings we're going to read of stuff, data. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a little for loop that loops through the array and reads the console, right? Or sorry, reads the file data. Here it is right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to output each one of them to the console, but I'm going to actually read it into the array, right? So I read the data from the array, from the line, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say file array, and then it's going to be of some kind of loop. So I'm going to make it like I. File array I, we don't have that yet, right? Is equal to file data. Because our file data is going to change every time, right? And of course, we're going to put all this in a loop. So we're going to say for, here's our loop, and we're going to take this whole thing and cut it, put it in here, and now the data is all the same, right? And we're going to say this is less than 10 for now, because we know how big the array is, right? So less than 10, la la la, and print out. Okay. and run. Right? So all we're doing is going to the array. Now you might say, wait a minute, you could just put that in there. We don't even know if the array is reading, right? How do we check to see if my hello world is actually is different data, right? Because right now they all look the same. Each line is exactly identical, right, to every other line. Well, that's easily solved, right? And I'll update GitHub in a second. So what we're going to do here is in our write method, which is up here, right? We're writing a delimiter, right, at the end. But I want to do it so that every line, when we start off, we also write a line number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. We can do that. We can do that here. So we write a number at the beginning of every line, and then at the end, we do a write line statement. So here is where we do it. We go writer dot write. That's what we want to kind of do. And inside there, we're going to write a number, right? Well, the number is going to be j, of course, right? We're going to write j. And we're going to give it a space. So j plus space, right? So that way we have a bit of a space between the hello worlds. Okay, now let's see how it looks. Bam. Right, so each of the data is different. And now we know that we're reading from our file. And if I was going to actually look at the file to see that this is correct, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we can see it right here. Okay, are you guys good? No clue?
You lost me as soon as you did all those last year.
Let me go back and update to GitHub so you can look there. So I'm going to go changes. I'm going to go say updated read file method and write file method. Commit home. You should have all this stuff now if you want to look at the code. And the reason why I did it like this, all I've done is I've just extracted this, and I've got a lot of white space in here. That's why it looks so messy. But at the end of the day, if you actually go up on GitHub, you'll see what I'm doing. This outer loop, right, as an example, it reads every line. So this one here, this outer loop, this outer for loop, when it's writing, right, it writes each record. So this is like where it does a record write, right? So I need this outer loop to write 10 records, or write new record. And the inner loop, what it does is it actually constructs each record, right? Constructs each record, because all it's doing is it's going through each column, each record, field by field. So if you were to look at I and J, and these are kind of weird, the I would be your column. So let me just rename these if I can with getting away with it. Let's just do it manually because it'll affect everything else. There's other I's and J's inside here. I'm just going to rename this manually. Oops, that's what happens when you rename manually, and I'll update it to GitHub so you see what I'm saying. So here's my column. So each column it's going to write is going to be hello world. That's what it's going to do, right? And then I'm going to do each row. This is going to be the row on the outside. Each row or record, right, is going to be the J's. Right, so here's my row. So row, 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 row your boat, right? And then here's my columns. My columns going to be the inside, right? This is how I write the file, so by row and column, right? And when I go to my reading, here's my read file, right? This is just going to read each row in at a time. So this would be row, right? Because I'm not reading column by column, I'm reading the whole line in all at the same time. And this is what's going to, what you'll probably need, this almost exact script for your assignment 5. Because I don't care about reading each individual. I didn't tell you to put it inside an array of records, right, or array of fields. I just told you to put it in one big array. So each line is a string. That's all I'm looking for right now. If you can do this, right, so each of your array elements is going to hold one line of data. This is read one record. Right? And I'll say line of data. So you understand what that is. Now take away some of this white space. So we'll clean it up. We still have this gap, that we're reading and writing to like the desktop right now. And my desktop is different than your desktop. How do we fix that? And that'll be a topic that we're going to cover tomorrow, right? Because I'm going to figure out how to do it with you guys. Because I don't want you guys looking in your debug folder. I want you to know how to do relative path for your projects, because you're going to need that when we do file I/O with Windows Forms, which we're going to cover hopefully tomorrow. Yes. Tell me. I'm loving it, if you can find the way. Up here at the top, yeah? Tell me. Meanwhile, while you're doing that, I will go to Team Explorer, go home, go changes, and go updated. Okay. So I made a lot of updates. So I know we're running a little late, bear with me, and then we will fix it up. Yes, what is it? Get current directory? Okay, yeah. Get parent, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Hold on. Directory dot get current directory. Yeah. Like close like this. Everything like that. Did you try this? It's like this? Oh. Well, here. So take all this out. What colon? Okay, yeah, here. Yeah. Yeah. Capital P. Yeah. Dot. Like that. No dots and no parentheses, right? Like that. Let's see if that's right. Well, I'm not getting an error. That's a good sign. Debug directory is not debug directory. We'll call this app directory, right? And let us show this thing when I launch. So here's console.write line. And we'll say app directory. I like it. If it works, all the power, right? And let's run it. Hey, that's good. That's the way. That tells me where I want. So this is this. Let me update that to GitHub so everyone has that. Changes are excellent. Thank you. So we're going to go to updated app directory, appdir string, and we'll go to comments, and we'll go to unsync commits and sync. So that first line is your app directory. We're going to go back to this tomorrow because we need that, because I want it in your current directory, not in this weird desktop, which means that if I replace this path name to my app directory, which is this, it won't break my code. And now when I update it and run this thing, it puts it right in here. And the reason why I can't see it, of course, is because I need to refresh, which is this button. And it's not, I'm not seeing it though. It's bad. Huh? Can you see it? Thank you. Have a great day. We'll see each other tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll start Windows Forms 101.